JJWalsh here in Hiroshima, and
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tove here in Yokohama.
it's great to start again. This is our first short takes, sustainability focused short takes looking at issues in Japan. And this is the first one for 2023. Happy New Year, Tova.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Nice to see the sunshine at the beginning of the year.
It is. It is. Let's dive right in, shall we?
Sounds good.
So usually we'll talk about a few different issues that have kind of been on our radar, and then at the end we end with some book recommendations, and I believe we're going to stick to that for 30 minutes this time. Tova, do you want to start? You had a really interesting report, the circularity gap. You want to just give us a little overview?
Right. So this came out, I think, very recently, and it was looking at sort of at the moment globally, what are the figures for circularity in business, and the figures were very disappointing, actually really low, and they've actually decreased in the last few years. So it went from 9.1%, they said, in 2018. Currently, we're at 7.2%. So that's disappointing to see that the trend is going the wrong way, which means that over 90% of raw materials are being wasted, which obviously is not sustainable. We can't keep going like this. We have one planet, finite resources. So it laid out in the report some different ways we can look at building circularity into different systems, whether that's production of sort of goods, consumer goods, also things like in food systems, in energy, water usage, so that we can keep within the planetary boundaries and the resources available. So I think it was
just to
an
give people
interesting.
a little
Sorry.
refresher what circularity means, right? So that the idea of reusing resources once they're
Yeah.
in our environment instead of always getting new resources, and changing the idea from make to waste and
Hmm.
end of life, like one line,
Yeah.
to an idea of make to remake and reuse and keep using in a circular fashion.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So there are different ways you can do this, right? So you can look at the product at its end of life and say, okay, can it be repurposed? Can it be recycled? Can we sort of break it down into its constituent parts and use those again? So there at the moment, I think a lot of materials are designed not with that in mind. So it gets to the end of the life cycle of the product, and then it's like, oh well, now what are we going to do with this? How do we deal with this? But if instead we can start thinking longer term to, all right, how do we? I mean, I really like this model there that you've just pulled up, right? So, thinking from the product design stage and saying, actually, how do we design this product so that it's easier to deal with at the other end? So it's designed to be recycled and go back into the circular system. So it can be things like, what different materials are used in it. Is it a combination of different materials that are bonded together? How are they bonded? Is it possible to break them apart again afterwards? If you've got plastics, for example, is it a type of plastic that can be recycled, or is it mixed? And if it's mixed, it makes it very difficult to separate it back out again into reusable parts.
Yeah.
So sort of starting right at the design process to think about, okay, how can we make it so that we can reclaim these materials at the end, which if you're a manufacturer, actually, reclaiming them means that you're not having to buy new virgin materials. So obviously there's you have to set up new processes and systems to reclaim it, which takes some initial investment. But then once that happens, you're able to cut the costs because you're not buying new raw materials. And it also helps with stability, right? So we've saw so much disruption through COVID, and now with, the situation in Russia, Ukraine, disrupting supply chains. If you've got your materials already in this circular loop, then it's much more stable. You've got your resources where you need them.
Yeah. really exciting to think about how to reuse things and
Yeah.
the communication aspect of
Mm,
talking to designers and designers
yeah.
seeing what happens at the end stage and how people are like, for example, in Kamikatsu, that's one of the things that they try to
Yes.
do is invite the designers to that end stage where they're trying to take things apart. The mixed materials, like you said, is real problematic.
Mm,
So, like at Hotel Y at the Waste Center, they often invite company people
yeah.
to take apart things and to think about, wow, this is multi like plastic and metal and burnables and biodegradables all together. Ooh, that's a problem, isn't it? And they don't really think about it when they're
Yeah.
making it, right? So we just
Exactly.
need better
Exactly.
communication and
Right.
awareness as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. It always comes back to that, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And one example, which doesn't seem related, but very related to the whole idea of circularity, is MINKA. And
Ah,
that's one of the things I
yeah.
wanted to talk about this time. I came
Hmm.
across this film, which was a few years ago, covered by New York Times,
Hmm.
related to the speaker at the next MINKA summit for this year.
Ooh, fantastic.
So his name is, wait, I'm blanking right now. Hold on, hold on. Yoshihiro Takishita, and
Oh,
he was featured by the New York Times. This film called Minka was made about him and by Davina Pardo,
hmm.
and it was a Kickstarter campaign all about his and AP reporter who was working in Tokyo, how they fell in love with renovating old Minka and
Mm.
moved a Minka from a rural area to Kamakura. So
Oh,
the
wow.
whole idea of taking apart all these
Yeah.
beautiful materials and the Minkas and traditional houses, how they're all fitted
Yeah.
together with that purpose in mind of being able to take it apart and
Yeah.
move it. And
Hmm.
so I'm really excited about hearing him. He's the keynote speaker at the Minka Summit this year. The dates have been decided for April 21st to 23rd in Aichi. And
Hmm.
I'll put the links below for the Kominka Japan website, but you can get more details there. But I'm going to jump ahead to my book introduction because the book by John Roderick about Minka is an
Hmm.
older book, but you can get a Kindle version for just a couple dollars on
Yeah.
Amazon right now. So I'm excited to read that in like expectation of the Minka Summit.
Hmm.
I don't know if I can make it there to Aichi this year, but I went to the one in Kyoto last year, and Alex Kerr was the keynote speaker, and it was just such a wonderful passion for reusing things,
Yeah.
passion for sustainability, not just
Mhm.
about old houses, but
Yeah.
kind of focused on old houses and Minka renovations as a great example of how to
Hmm.
live a more
Yeah.
sustainable life or run a sustainable business.
Exactly, exactly. These are not new concepts, right? It's only recently, really, in the last sort of 5, 6 decades or more, that we've really started to go for this linear make, use waste kind of approach. Before that, people were really good at reusing things, and it's about getting back to that. I think, in the context of the modern environment with new materials and things like that. But
Yeah.
that mindset, I think, is there. It's been lost. We've moved away from it a lot, but it is still down there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Alexander Brown has joined from LinkedIn. Nice to see you, Alex. I had the chance to talk with Alex this year so far about his company, Tokyo Esque,
Ah,
and they help international businesses come to work and sell their products and services in Japan. So they're kind of a localization business. We need more of that.
yes.
Definitely. Thanks for joining. Now, you talked about some of the data about the circularity report and how
Mhm.
worldwide it's not looking so good. I had a look at CCPI, the Climate Change Performance Index.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Japan has dropped down to 50th.
Mm. Right.
It was at 45th last year, but the report is saying Japan is not on target to meet its 2030 targets for emissions reductions. And it's unfortunate news, but there's no reason that Japan can't get back on target for this. Of course, a lot of countries are falling behind, and many are saying COVID was really difficult time to keep up on the targets. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. So this could be a year when we see more passion to get back on target. We want to be climbing up in the ranks, not down in the ranks. For keeping on target like that, right?
Very much. Well, that kind of leads into, I think, another of the topics that I wanted to mention today, which is leadership and actually leading organizations or countries to keep them on track towards those goals. Paul Polman, who I'm a big fan of, put a post on LinkedIn a few days ago talking about leadership and talking about, really, it's not that we don't have the means, the technology, the understanding. We know what needs to be done. We have, a lot of the technology we need. And I love the way he starts with, can leadership levels rise faster than sea levels? Because really that's what it comes down to. I think it's having the courage as a leader to say, actually, no, this is not good enough. Incremental improvements or making excuses about, this situation or that situation. Yes, it's tough. There's always going to be something that you could use as an excuse. At the end of the day, it comes down to, are the leaders prepared to take bold steps and get their people engaged and empowered to make the changes that we need? So I was really always a big fan of what he writes anyway. It always makes a lot of sense, and it always comes from very much the people side of sustainability, which is what we do. But also I was pleased to see coming out of Davos as well, quite a lot of talk on leadership this time. I haven't looked into much of the details of what's coming out yet. It's been a bit of a busy week, but it was really good to see. I saw an article early on in the week, I think, just as discussions were started, talking about leadership and actually what's needed for us to make up the lost ground and get back on track with what we're doing. So pleased to see that that's really coming into the fore now. It's not just about the processes and the targets. Of course, those are really, really important. We need the data. They need to be science-based targets, but we also need the leadership to put those things into action.
Yeah, and inclusivity and clear communication across channels, even within your own organization, right? Like we just see so many communication failures, which can fix things that are problematic once it goes out. But really, it's your organization can improve communication and really, oversee things a lot better. In terms of leadership, I think it runs right into this project, this campaign. I talked to Marian Hara yesterday, and I talked with Rochelle Kopp last year. These campaigners are trying really hard to protect this project at Jingu, Gaien, and get them to pause and to really think about what the project is needed, why new buildings are needed, why trees are needed to be cut down. Like what is the rationale? Are you getting enough expert advice from environmentalists, from the local community members? Is this really wanted? And Marian had done an interesting survey with international visitors in the Jingu Gaien while they were out campaigning to try to get this project stopped. And so many people from around the world were so passionate about the trees and the area. And Tove, you mentioned as well, you had been working in the area and went out, and the feeling of feeling refreshed and relaxed because you're in a more natural area around beautiful trees. And even the old buildings, the old stadium, it has a lot of charm. And is there a really need to use all that money to make something new, which has a lot of carbon impact as well, right?
Massive impact. And I think just, the environmental impact, I think, is the most important factor there. But also, I mean, you were mentioning earlier, I mean, look at it. Wow, it's gorgeous, right? And those people standing there with cameras, I saw that a lot when, I was working in that area, and you'd go and walk through, and whatever season it is, it's beautiful. There are always people out taking pictures of it. This is, something that draws people in. It's good for the people who work in the area. They can get out for mental health, for well-being, to get some time away from the office environment and unwind for a bit. But also for tourists. I mean, you were talking about that a little bit before we came in, and it was interesting to see Marianne's research as well, some comments there supporting that.
Yeah. And we need more carbon capture. And we know old trees, a lot of these trees are 100 years old. So the idea is, oh, we'll just transplant them somewhere else, or we'll just plant new trees. Well, that's not really environmentally based sound knowledge right now.
Yeah.
We know that the old trees are our savior. We do not want to cut them down or transplant them and risk them dying because they're moved, or new trees are just not going to absorb as much carbon. There's just so many reasons. Plus, they're so beautiful.
Exactly. Tokyo needs to hold on to every tree it's got. I mean, I'm always really struck. I love Japan. I love Tokyo, and I the countryside here is gorgeous. But you go into the cities, I was really struck with the difference actually when I was in London recently for Christmas, visiting family. Again, it's a huge city. The weather was pretty terrible most of the time, but you look around, and everywhere you look, there was green. There are trees. And when I came back to Tokyo, just looking out across, it's like, wow, no, it's gray everywhere you look. It needs these trees, to keep the ones we've got, and more if possible, for the air quality, for the environment, but also the visual appeal of the city, for both people who live here and visitors that Japan wants to draw in. We can't afford to lose these places.
Yeah. And it's that combination too of the old buildings and seeing value in the old buildings, like the old stadium. Does it need to come down, or you just want a new modern version? Is that cost and the environmental damage that's going to happen because of a new build, is it worth it? Is it really going to give enjoyment more? Like where is your value proposition here, right? And it's not only Tokyo. This is happening all over Japan. We have campaigns. Unfortunately, the Central Park in Hiroshima is being redeveloped into a big soccer stadium. That kind of happened really fast without too many local people being able to talk about what they were hoping the green space would be kept. There's another one in Hiroshima around the city library, which is very unclear what's going to happen. Are the trees going to be preserved, right? And Marianne was mentioning Nagoya, there's these things happening. A lot of parks are kind of under the chopping block for some reason. It's easier to develop a clear open space instead of knocking down Akia neighborhoods that don't need to be there and using that, right? So yeah, there's a lot of questions there as to the reasons why the parks are being cut up. Let's not just do it because it's easier.
Right, exactly. We need slightly longer term thinking than that.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the pictures I saw in the Jingu Gaien picture was a really cool new car. A lot of people will go there for wedding photographs or in kimono, but also if you get a new car, a lot of people take their car there to take a picture next to the trees, which takes me to my next topic about I really think this is the year we're going to see some EVs in Japan. So I did a short video, and right after I did the video, I had loads of new information. Japan is subsidizing electric vehicles like crazy this year. You can get 650,000 yen back as a subsidy when you buy an electric vehicle.
Wow.
Tokyo gives you an extra like 450,000. So there are some huge incentives for saving money from the purchase side. But also I was looking back at all of my spending on charging over last year with my Tesla app. And I saved so much money. And it was not only the saving of money for charging instead of gas, but it was also the convenience of
Yeah.
mostly charging at home using my solar panels. And then
Hmm.
you have the added value of emotionally and mentally feeling good that
Yeah.
you're driving on clean energy. And there's a lot more brands that are entering the market this year. We've got Hyundai. A guy reached out with a new electric Hyundai. So
Yeah.
he's going to join my show and talk about his reason to choose that. Really good prices for that. A
Hmm.
new brand is entering the market called BYD from
Ooh,
China, and they've
okay.
got some very reasonably priced
Hmm.
EVs. Now, no big news from Toyota yet entering the market. You can only lease a Toyota EV right now.
Right.
Um, Honda has a Honda E, but it's a little expensive for the range. Nissan has a very reasonably priced Leaf and a few other models with less range. Tesla still has two great cars, good range, good prices. So if you're interested in EVs, this is the year to think about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is going to start to, it'll create a sort of positive feedback loop, won't it? The more people that get them, that understand the benefits, and that actually this is possible in terms of the infrastructure and stuff, that the more that it'll accelerate the development of the infrastructure and making it easy
Yeah.
to charge wherever you are. So yeah,
Definitely.
it's
Well,
very
Japan has
positive
a
for me.
growing and really great charging network.
Yeah.
There's more chargers than gas stations right now,
Oh,
and
that's
that's
fantastic.
only gonna increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then there's rent-a-car companies are getting in the EV
Yes.
game, car sharing
Mhm.
companies as well.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna see a lot of acceleration of the EV infrastructure and market this year. Yeah, very exciting.
Exciting. Yeah.
We have a comment from Sliman Azizi on LinkedIn. It's a challenge to affect real change when citizens are somewhat divorced from the democratic process. It's
Mm.
a problem in many countries. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting people involved, like you said earlier, it's about communication, right? And giving people the opportunity to see how this connects to them, to their lives, that the impact that'll have. I think that would help get people more engaged. But it's interesting that you mentioned in Hiroshima how that happened so quickly. There was no time for people to hear about it and to get involved. So there needs to be, I think, space created for that. The government, if they're going to make these decisions, or local governments or whatever, need to give people time to understand what's going on and what the impact would be.
Definitely. And that's something that Marianne talked about last
Mm.
night. She had a little bit of time to talk about her work with Amnesty International
Mhm.
and how they're trying to raise awareness about the death penalty in Japan, which is
Mhm.
often off the radar for most people. They don't realize how the information is not readily available about how convictions are made. There are some false convictions, even for people on death row.
Mm.
How death penalty is carried out without much advance notice. People don't even know in their family if somebody's going to
Mm.
be executed. She also mentioned about the asylum seekers coming to Japan and how that is really kind of not secret, but very difficult to get information. And so
Mhm.
their work with Amnesty is trying to raise awareness about human rights issues, even in Japan, and things that you can do in writing letters and just kind of taking in more information.
Mm.
And I think that's a great thing that she's doing with Amnesty, just to raise awareness, just talking
Yeah.
about these things. But
Mhm.
the idea that even signing your name is quite difficult in Japan,
Right.
she was saying.
Yeah.
Like, people are resistant to even write their name and address.
Mhm.
So having that willingness to use your freedoms to help other people who've lost their freedom or
Mhm.
lost their rights, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, you often work with Jane Best, and you guys have an event coming up, don't you?
We do. So on the 10th of March, we've got the REI, so that's Refugee Empowerment International Gala. So a huge evening. It'll be at the Conrad Hotel in Tokyo, which is a beautiful venue. And it's going to be a really exciting evening. So last year, we finally managed to have it for the first time since COVID. So I think last year was the first time in 3 years we've been able to hold the gala. And we've got it again on the 10th of March. So the idea is it's raising funds. There'll be a silent auction with some pretty spectacular prizes. There'll be raffles, so there's artwork. There are trips overseas and stuff for the prizes. They're really quite something. And the idea is that it raises funds to support REI's projects. So REI works with refugee projects, not in Japan, and the fundraising is done here, but it's projects, for example, in Lebanon, in Nairobi, and several in the sort of Thai-Myanmar border area. And it's all about that. Their projects are really sustainable in that it's by the refugees for the refugees. So it's not just coming in as outsiders saying, oh, here's what we think you need, and here's how you should do it. And there's none of that. So the projects reach out to us at REI and they say, look, this is what we want to do. This is what we think we need. And here's a business plan and a proposal. And then we evaluate that and make sure it's solid. And they, have the right idea for, how they're actually going to make this viable. And that it impacts people positively, gives them a chance to take back control of their lives and rebuild futures. And then we donate to the projects on that sort of either for 6 months, 12 months, review again at the end. So it's a very thorough and careful process, but it's really nice in that it's the refugees themselves running these projects, and you can see how it impacts their lives, whether that's sort of, you mentioned human rights earlier. So one of the projects is educating them on their rights. Most of them have no idea, when they're being kicked out from Myanmar, for example, potentially what are their rights here. So educating them around that, working with local sort of lawyers so that they can understand, okay, this is what's possible actually, and here's how I can take back control of my life, and then using that knowledge to go and to help others understand as well. And they've got ones for mothers, supporting new mothers again. So it's a lot of it about awareness and education, how to care for a newborn when it's their first kid and they've had no support, if they've had to flee wherever they're coming from. So that the projects are amazing, and the gala is a great way. It'll be a really fun night, but it's also a great way to help support projects like this. So if you're interested in coming, please do. It'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. And I had the pleasure of talking with both you and Jane Best about the good work that REI does. I'll put the link below. It's a year ago now. We need to have a catch up.
Yes, yeah.
Now we've got just a couple more minutes, Tove. I talked about my book recommendation.
Yep.
I'm gonna search for MINKA and get the digital version. It's kind of an older book by John Roderick. But you had a recommendation for Mio. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so this is a beautiful book written by Kinota Braithwait, who lives locally here. And his daughter, Mio, so she's mixed race and was suffering bullying at school and getting really down about that, about the color of her skin, was being, teased and bullied because of that. And so he wrote this book to support her, but also to educate kids on the fact that there's a whole range of people out there and this is all beautiful. And since he launched the book, he's then been going out into schools and universities and using this as the basis for raising awareness, for giving people a place to talk about these issues, because it's a subject. I know we've had these conversations in some of the corporate clients we work with where you can talk about gender diversity, you can talk maybe about LGBTQ, you can talk about disability. When it comes to race, people get very sensitive and they don't know how to talk about it. But it's here, it goes on. And so he's doing amazing work with, as you can see from these pictures, with different, educational establishments, really creating that safe space for people to talk about it. So if you're from an educational establishment and, here in Japan, please reach out to him and, go and invite him to come and talk to you, to your teachers, to your students, because I think he's got a really important message and a great way of getting it across.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'd love to have him on my show.
Yes.
I think I've just connected on social media, so I'll reach out.
Fantastic. Yeah, please
Yeah.
do.
Slimin, another comment, the bullying culture in Japan is a real thorn in the country. I think, it's lack of awareness and lack of exposure. The
Yeah.
more international kids are around in schools, the easier it becomes. We've seen over time. Yeah.
But it's got to
Definitely.
start with awareness, right? And
Yeah.
education and creating the spaces to talk about this. And a lot of it comes from fear and unfamiliarity, I think, rather than malice, at least to begin with. So if you can get people earlier on to understand, why this is not acceptable, how it hurts people, and then move beyond that, then that's hopefully they're taking that into their adult lives as well.
Yeah, for sure. But books and periodicals and social media, it all helps to raise awareness. I'm so glad he's done that, and
Yeah.
it's been so well received. Thank you so much, Tove. That's our 30 minutes. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. And I think we've got somebody from Denver listening, Enrique, all the way in Denver. So hi, Enrique. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, fabulous stuff, everybody, from YouTube and LinkedIn today, and hopefully some people watching on repeat. It's wonderful to have you here. Thanks so much for all the great comments and questions today. And we'll try to do this once a month, right, Tova?
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay.
We'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining. Take care.